Dr. Jeff Reed. He has a PhD in linguistics and history and is published on a history of language and humans. He's spent 30 years in the technology industry working on linguistics and artificial intelligence, and now builds solutions that are used by wildlife researchers. He focuses much of his free time interacting with wildlife, practicing paleo living, researching animal communications via computational linguistics, and living as part of nature. He's an executive committee member of the Upper Yellowstone Watershed Group and Wild Livelihoods, promoting the coexistence of people and wildlife, though he says here he considers people as wildlife too. So I shall place you in the very capable hands of Dr. Jeff Reed.
Greetings, everyone. I am very thrilled to share some never-before-played wild wolf calls with you today. My name is Jeff Reed. I was raised in the mountains and valleys of southwest Montana in the U.S., just north of Yellowstone National Park. My academic career involved linguistics and dead languages, but my professional career was spent working for large software companies like Microsoft. I focus most of my energies and passions now on the conservation of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. I'm one of multiple people working on the Cry Wolf project, and I am so thankful to work with some amazing people. Here are just a few of them working their butts off and checking the health of a wolf in the heart of a winter storm. And here's a team putting out 30 acoustic recorders for a focus study we did in January. I'd like to share an audio clip from a wolf called 907F, known by many locals and one of the longest living as well as the most prolific wolves in Yellowstone's modern history, who has one functioning eye. When she made this sound, she was all alone by one of the park's recorders this winter on November 15, 2023 at 5:49 p.m. She was separated from the rest of her pack and appeared to be trying to find them. Earlier, elk had just come running by the recorder, perhaps with wolves chasing them. Now, if you would graciously do me a favor, please close your eyes. An hour later, she howled like this for over 30 minutes. Okay, you can open your eyes. This is what she said, or at least one way in which it can be written down, a spectrogram. Humans who co-evolved with wolves know this sound deep in their bones. From a species who gave us our dogs, without which who knows where Homo sapiens would be today, dog brains light up in an fMRI when they hear humans in a different way than they hear other sounds. And human brains light up when they hear dogs. And perhaps someday someone will study how your brain and my brain lights up when it hears a wolf howl. This is 907F. Recently, there's been a lot more attention in the press about trying to decipher non-human communication. Here are just two recent mainstream media articles, one by The New Yorker titled "Talk to Me, Can Artificial Intelligence Allow Us to Speak to Another Species?" and one by The New York Times, "The Animals Are Talking, What Does It Mean?" And that is what we're trying to do with the Cry Wolf project in conjunction with Yellowstone National Park biologists. Here's the study area. The greater Yellowstone ecosystem, one of the largest intact temperate zones in the world, and where wolves were reintroduced in 1995 after they had been exterminated throughout the Rockies by the 20s. The push pins indicate the various recorders that were put out in what we call the northern range of the greater Yellowstone, which runs along the Wyoming-Montana border. The economy in this area is by far dominated by tourism revenues, which people come here from all over the world and spend millions of dollars a year to see one of the few remaining strongholds of wild wolves, grizzlies, and bison in the American West. Here we are, Dan Staler, head of the Wolf Project, amongst other things, and Kira Cassidy, one of the research associates in Yellowstone National Park, putting out one of the wildlife acoustic ARUs, or an autonomous recording unit. It's late May and you can see the snow in the background. And here we are in the summer teaching a handful of the hundreds of thousands of people who visit Yellowstone, and we're teaching them about bioacoustics. And there's Jeremy going above and beyond, helping me get a recorder higher up in a tree. Here is one of the wildlife acoustic ARUs we're using. And for those of you who might be new to bioacoustics, an ARU is like a camera trap that takes pictures, but in this case, it takes sound. And we can record audio 24 hours a day, 365 days a year with no breaks, recording every sound from a common chorus frog to an endangered species to the echolocation of a bat. Depending upon the circumstances, we can get 1 to 2 months out of the batteries. And here in Yellowstone, we have to put them higher up in the trees because of what you'll hear in this recording. That grizzly bear stood up on its hind feet, opened the recorder, didn't destroy it, and you can hear the batteries falling out. Wolves are loud, on average 100 decibels when they howl, so they can be heard from a long ways away. Basically, a howl is the equivalent of standing 10 feet in front of your car while someone honks the horn. In fact, we picked up a chorus howl in a place called Slough Creek, all the way over to the recorder in Lamar Valley, and it was 6.7 kilometers away. But we're also learning that wolves make more quiet howls, and that's an advantage to ARUs in that they can pick up very close sounds without humans being around to disrupt them. If you're recording 24/7 on multiple recorders spaced 6 kilometers across the landscape, finding specific wolf calls is like finding a needle in a haystack. One acoustic recorder creates enough data in a year to put on this small hard drive. And to put that in perspective, in the 1970s, this magnetic tape could hold about an hour of audio. We're storing 8,760 of those cassette tapes on a device that size. Our CNN AI models, as well as Kaleidoscope Pro's classifier tools, help us find the needles in the haystack. And we can now do bioacoustics at scale. This plot represents all of the wolf vocalizations pulled from the recorders this year. 937 separate wolf vocalization events, ranging from howls to chorus howls to barks, yelps, whimpers, whines, and moans. Each dot is a vocal event. The larger the dot, the more the events for that given day. The y-axis represents the hour of day from 0 or midnight up to 23 or 11 p.m., and the x-axis is date, in this case 6 months of data. You'll notice the mostly empty space in the middle of the day where wolves are not as vocally active. And if I plot the same data on a 24-hour clock, it looks like this. And I can overlay the average sunrise and sunset times during the summer, and you can see that they mostly vocalize in darker hours. 74% of the days had wolf vocalization events. That's 3 out of 4 days. Some of the questions we're now asking of the data include the how, the why, and the so what. How do wolves hear and vocalize? In other words, what are the biomechanics? Why do wolves vocalize and process sounds? Can we count the number of wolves and identify individual groups? Can bioacoustics inform population estimates? Can we use ARUs in real-time livestock conflict scenarios? And can we have some fun? I'm not going to discuss the CNN AI classifiers in detail here, but I'll make a brief comment for those of you other brave souls trying to work on needles in the haystack problems. My experience is that CNNs are generally as accurate as Kaleidoscope Pro's classification approach, but can be better at eliminating false positives if, and this is a big if, and it takes a lot of work, the training data set has to be done really well. But I'm a practical software engineer who works with practical wildlife managers, and the hidden Markov models are faster, more flexible, they're good enough in most cases, and they're easier to iterate on. Not to mention the professional user interface of Kaleidoscope Pro. Time is money, and I'm happy to pay for good software. There's a place for CNNs, of course, don't get me wrong, and we're going to keep developing them. But I think some folks get caught up in the hype of AI and ironically bring a gun to a knife fight. Here's some info on how we use Kaleidoscope Pro to help us find wolf calls in the haystack. I trained the software using 1 month of 24/7 recordings, recorded at 22,000 hertz and 12 decibel gain. And after a lot of experimentation, I settled on the following cluster settings. The signal parameters were 200 to 750 min-max frequency, 1.5 to 60 seconds min-max length of duration, and the rest were defaults. The cluster parameters used an FFT window size of 21.33 milliseconds. There's a wolf on the top spectrogram, and then one of the false positives that are common are airplanes in the bottom spectrogram. And then I tested it against multiple different recorder data sets, and this is just one of them, which had 4 months of 24/7 recordings. And we got 3,548 wolf detections out of 52,000 total detections. The true positives, we found 8 new detections that I hadn't found when I manually reviewed the audio files. We had about 3,000 false positives, which can seem like a lot, but when you can tab through the UI in Kaleidoscope Pro, you can quickly see which ones are wolves and which aren't. Common false positives are insect, snipe, and airplane, and uncommon ones are coyote, bison, sandhill cranes, ravens, owls, and wind. We had 5 false negatives, and by simply creating another classifier against a different data set, I can reduce those down to roughly 0. Ultimately, there's the sound of the snipe, and in the lower spectrogram, there's the wolf. But ultimately, the proof's in the pudding, and what used to take me 10 hours of manual data valuation is now taking me 10 minutes. So let's listen to some of the wolves that the classifier helped us find. We're going to listen to never before heard recordings of the Rescue Creek Pack. Here they are in the spring of 23 on an elk carcass with the usual subjects, ravens and grizzly bears hanging around. So let me set this up for you. What you're seeing is a 24-hour spectrogram from the rendezvous site of the Rescue Creek Pack. Each row is 1 hour, and there are 24 rows. The brighter orange indicates the loudness of a sound, dark indicates silence. And if you zoom into a particular sound, you see more of the writing on the wall, so to speak. Here's what our classifier helped us find: a classic wolf chorus howl. If you're new to spectrograms, the y-axis indicates pitch or frequency, low pitch on the bottom and higher pitches at the top. The white bar indicates the sound you're hearing at that particular time. So let's play it. A typical chorus howl includes a series of howls by themselves at the beginning, and then another wolf howling, often at a higher pitch, then a preamble where others join in, and then all mayhem, and then a tailing off, often followed by other howls and other calls. And one of the questions we're looking into is, do specific wolves, for example, an alpha male or female, kick off the chorus howl? Here's 2 different chorus howls, but the first is by coyotes. Coyotes typically howl at about 600 hertz on the low end, and wolves at 350 hertz or middle F on your piano. Let's go forward 3 hours in our 24-hour day to the next wolf vocalization. There it is. You can't really see it on the 1 hour spectrogram, but the classifier found it. And this is what I call a close range howl. And this one is very low in frequency. The ARU lets us pick up vocalizations that we can't hear from longer distances. Howls come in all shapes and sizes, perhaps functioning to ID one another in the same way dolphins have signature whistles that they use to identify each other. Here's just a view of some of them in spectrogram form, and I'll play my favorite from this summer, which is in the bottom right. How many howls does it take for a wolf to get to the center of a lollipop? Well, I don't think we really know what drives the repetition patterns. Sometimes wolves only give 1 to 2 howls. Sometimes they can go on for a long time. This is a 12-minute howl sequence, and here is a 30-minute sequence by 907F, which I played for you earlier. And these were in roughly the 320 hertz range. The duration of each individual howl averaged 3 to 4 seconds. But sometimes they can be as short as half a second and sometimes can go on as long as 12 seconds. A team of folks are working on determining how the size and shape of wolf vocal tracts and ears may determine how particular wolves hear each other's sounds. And they might be able to use it to determine relative body size or even gender, hormonal conditions, and yes, even attractiveness. So could we play, for example, a lower frequency howl to indicate a large-bodied wolf to deter wolves from livestock conflict scenarios? This audio is 907F's howl downshifted to 220 hertz. Here's a prototype of the battery-operated playback device that we're building, innovation that could help in livestock conflict mitigation. We're in fundraising mode, and I want to give a huge thank you to Wildlife Acoustics for helping us out with the Kaleidoscope Pro grant. Okay, let's get back to the 24 hours and listen to this vocalization. Those are growls, snarls, and yelps. Soundscaping can also be used to chronicle human-generated sounds on the landscape. Airplanes happen to also look like a chorus howl on a spectrogram. We trained these types of sounds out of our CNN AI model, and it made it work a lot better. Here are all of the commercial airplanes that flew over during that 24-hour period. And in red are the 4 chorus howls. Here's a different type of wolf vocalization from this day. Those went on for the next 6 hours. Here's another one. And here's some harmonic moans. Here's some barks and woofs. Wolves bark and woof in stressful contexts, for example, when near a rival pack or a competing predator such as a grizzly bear or cougar, and they come in different forms such as woofs, disturbance barks, which are shorter in duration and lower in pitch, and agonistic barks, which are longer and have more harmonics. Agonistic barks, like you're hearing here, are often emitted by the dominant individual, who often show dominance displays like a tail held high. Here's a whimper. Sounds like my English setter begging for dinner scraps. And these are called woas, and they appear to be an important signal for social bonding. Wolves will often do this, and you'll see them move their mouths open and close when they make the sound, and they'll nuzzle one another in a social context. And of course, let's end with an iconic howl series. This is the intro to the final chorus howl from that 24-hour period. For one of the most recognized sounds of the wild, we still know so little. So in honor of the fact that wolves are now in Yellowstone, we started a band, Five-Toed Wolf, and their debut album, including some of the sounds you heard today. You can check out the public outreach site at fivetoedwolf.com and learn more about how we use the words from some of the most famous wolves of Yellowstone's past to train classifiers that are helping us study and find the wolves of today and those yet not born. All of our data is available to the public and to researchers. You can go to the CryWolf webpage and access the data. And if you're a researcher, you can reach out to me and I'll provide access to the entire raw data set for download, as well as our AI algorithm and the Kaleidoscope Pro KCS file to use on your own recordings. Thanks for your time, and a big thank you to our current partners, including all the business members of the Wild Livelihoods Business Coalition, who are making the case to Montana's government officials that wolves, grizzly bears, and other carnivores are in the public trust and contribute significantly to our local economy north of Yellowstone Park. I've also included links to the various websites I mentioned, as well as my email if you want to reach out. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Jeff. That was absolutely fantastic. I really got into. I think everyone was loving the howls. So just clapping going up and thumbs and hearts and everything else. So thank you so much for that. And believe it or not, we have lots of questions coming your way. So I'll read a few out and we'll see how far we get. And I'm sure you'll answer more in the chat if more come in. But the first one is, I love the calls you played. Thank you. How easy is it to identify individual wolves? Or how difficult, maybe?
There's some decent research on, there's two different ways, right? We don't know how a wolf figures out another wolf. And that's part of the biomechanics we're studying. There's not a lot of research on vocal tracts and cochleas in wolves and those sorts of things. But from just using analytics and data analysis, there's some distinctive characteristics of wolves, especially if you have observational data with them. So that 907F, if I'm in Yellowstone and I'm around that pack and they're vocalizing, I can now pick out her call on a regular basis. They don't always do the same howl as individuals. So but it's the same way if I called you, Paul, and we had been long-term friends, you pick up the phone and you're like, oh, that's Jeff, right?
Yeah.
Even though you're not seeing me. But it's often just based on the frequency that they're at, and then how they end the howl. At what frequency do they end the howl at? Dropping, rising, those sorts of things.
So it's like kind of personal characteristics almost, rather than something that you can say it's this on a sonogram, or it's more from that perspective.
It's very much like how humans identify each other. It's the timbre of your vocal tract and how it makes formants in your sound.
Excellent. We've got one here from Angie Ruse. So there's a compliment and a couple of questions in here. Are you currently in Yellowstone, and how long will the Cry Wolf project be taking place in Yellowstone? I would love to feature you and your work in my documentary. So there's that element, but I suppose the question is, how long is the Cry Wolf project? Will it be taking place?
Yeah, there's no plans to stop. We just put out 10 more wildlife acoustics recorders this month. We're going into breeding season. And we plan on doing year-long recorders at fixed locations. And then because wolves move, they don't stay in the same spot. We call them roaming recorders, and we're tracking them around. So building a big data set is our current goal. And then at the same time, we're analyzing different questions that I brought up, like IDing particular wolves, because if we can ID particular wolves, and more importantly, can we ID packs, then you can start doing some population estimates and dynamics of movement across landscapes.
Excellent. Jeff, do you know how far howls at different frequencies carry over the landscape? This is probably a little bit like how long's a piece of string, but I'm wondering about low frequency sounds that carry long distances among elephants.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. The physics of sound, right? That high frequencies can get blocked by different things. It's the same reason thunder, right? If it's far away, you hear the low frequency sounds. If it's closer, you'll also hear that crack, that higher frequency. What I've noticed in the spectrograms, when I know the distance from the wolf vocalization to a spectrogram, and you could see it in that 24-hour spectrogram, those mid and lower tones really transfer well across landscapes. It depends, like, are they in trees? Are they in open space? So there's all sorts of interplays going on, but there's most likely a reason they evolved to those lower frequencies for long distance travel of the sounds.
Yeah. What program did you use to create the longer timescale spectrograms, the ones in pink and purple?
Yeah, you only wished there was something to do that. It's a lot of cut and paste, is how I did that one. But I have written some Python code, and there's some really brilliant folks who have worked on false color spectrograms that have some decent code, where you can take let's say a month's worth of recording. I took a month of data and created a 1 month spectrogram, and then I'm working on a 1 year spectrogram. So you can see the daily dawn chorus shift to the right over time as the days get shorter. But I'm happy to share that if you email me the Python code, or point you to a couple places that are doing that to make that more automated.
With that massive data set, are you just taking samples of sounds, like 1 minute in every 10, or are you just going, I'm doing the whole shebang, the whole lot?
If you're trying to do 1 month or a year, you're taking samples, but that's where Towsie's work on false color spectrograms and the code they wrote, where you sample on let's say a 24-hour day. You're not going to cram 24 hours of audio onto it'll just turn into a blob. So you're taking sampling, but with some smart work, you can get the samples that make sense to display.
Interesting question here. And I went to a wolf conference in Sweden last year, and this came up quite a bit, not necessarily with this technology, but can hunters, where wolf hunting has been legalized, use this technology for tracking and hunting wolf populations?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up pre and post wolf introduction, and if you live in the Rocky Mountain West, it is a controversial issue. It's always brought up, like the reintroduction to wolves. And I've spoken on this briefly. AI will be used for good and bad, and good and bad is in the eye of the beholder often. But I have taken multiple recorders, used localization software, and I can text myself that a bull elk is bugling at this location, and I could then go hunt it. The laws, camera traps are regulated by most states in the United States where you can't send real-time data as a hunter. But they didn't do that with bioacoustics. And it shows you how the government can never stay up to date with technology. And we all see that in AI today, just with humans, right? The politics will never stay up. But they need to, and I think most hunters, fair chase hunters, would agree that getting real-time data on the location of an animal to go kill it isn't fair chase hunting. And so the laws need to get updated for bioacoustics, because that will be available eventually.
Again, all these questions are brilliant, and we're not going to get time to go through all of them, but this is quite an interesting one. Do you have any tips for finding wolf howls in ARU data in landscapes where wolves are more rare?
Yeah, the same way I'm doing it where they're not rare. I'm happy to share the classifier, the KCS file from Kaleidoscope Pro, and it's pretty good. Like, I can make it better, but you know, we could do a Zoom call one-on-one, and I can show you how I do it. And so if you've got a big data set, it's even more valuable if you don't have a lot of wolves vocalizing, because you're trying to find that literal needle in a haystack. So I briefly talked about hidden Markov models as a tool, and that was a technical design issue by the smart people at Wildlife Acoustics. And then when we have our final CNN classifier, I'm happy to share that as well.
Well, you can't say fairer than that. That's brilliant. Thank you. When he's talking about the clever people at Wildlife Acoustics, that's not me. Okay. Just one more question, because we're running over, and I said they'll all be in the chat, in the Q&A section at the bottom, and I'm sure Jeff will keep typing away answers where he can. Could you tell me how many wolves were there in the final chorus from the calls alone? Can you? Yeah, how many wolves there were in the final chorus from their calls alone? Could you tell how many there were? Sorry. Yes.
It's a brilliant question. We call it the cocktail party problem, if you've ever heard that before. How does a human walk into a room with 30 people in it and pick out the voice that they want to listen to? That's part of the answer to your question. I can tell by looking at the spectrogram and knowing something about the wolves that are in that area. I can mostly count them. It depends on how good quality audio you have. But no one has gotten past, that I know of, even at Google, has gotten past like 4. They do this with dogs, getting past counting up to 4. And there's, you know, a theory called the Bourget theory that if like coyotes, like if you hear a coyote pack howl, a lot of people will think, oh, there's 80 coyotes outside my back door, and it might only be 3. It's often only 3. So we're working on that to see if we can enhance the software to really go through the spectrogram and identify that it's 7. That doesn't tell you how many wolves are there, because some of them might not be vocalizing. But counting those is a great research problem that several people are working on.
Oh, thank you so much. And I apologize that we've not read all these questions out, but we need to make these 6 hours long. But they're all brilliant questions as well. I'm just doing them in order, I'm afraid. But look, Jeff, thank you so much for your time and your presentation, which was wonderful. It's obviously appreciated. There's lots of claps going up there, so I'm assuming that everyone's happy. So yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you, Paul.
And,